Welcome to a custom-tailored deep dive into the architecture of the human heart. Today's topic is Two Hearts Before the Storm, and we're looking at the interior life of the end times. We've got a really fascinating stack of theological research and biblical analysis to unpack today, but our mission right off the bat is to completely pivot away from those exhausting, typical timeline debates of eschatology.
Right, yeah, the charts and the dates.
Exactly. We aren't here to argue about when the world ends or, who the Antichrist is. Instead, we are investigating this biblical concept of heart posture. We want to analyze how two very different views of the tribulation fundamentally shape a person's current daily intimacy with God.
And before we jump in, it's really important to note that we are examining the psychological and spiritual frameworks of these beliefs exactly as they're presented in the research. I mean, we aren't endorsing a specific theological timeline, and we definitely aren't taking sides in these historical or political debates.
Yeah, we're just reporting what's in the text.
Exactly. We are simply looking at how deeply held expectations about the future secretly wire your emotional and spiritual life in the present.
So, to kind of frame this for you, the listener, imagine you are piloting an aircraft at night. The sky is clear, the stars are out, and you trust what your eyes are telling you. But then you see it on the horizon, a massive, terrifying storm front. It's pitch black, lightning is flashing, and you are flying right toward it. Instantly, your entire physical and psychological state changes.
Oh, absolutely. Your heart rate spikes.
Right. You grip the yoke tighter, your eyes dart to the instrument panel. Everything you do in the present moment is suddenly dictated by how you expect to survive that future storm.
And depending on what kind of aircraft you believe you're flying, well, your preparation for that storm is going to look completely different. Your training, your instincts, your focus, they all shift based on whether you think your plane is built to punch right through the turbulence or if you expect air traffic control to route you entirely around the danger.
So if our goal is to navigate through this life and, whatever storms are coming, what exactly is the instrument panel we're using? The research points us toward the human heart, but we need to redefine what that actually means, because we're so conditioned by modern culture to view the heart as like a Valentine's Day symbol.
Right, just a place where fleeting romantic emotions live. But the ancient Hebrew and Greek texts, they operate on a totally different anatomical metaphor. So using the Hebrew word libab and the Greek word cardia, the heart is not the seat of emotion.
It's something else entirely.
Yeah, it's the absolute control center of the human person. It encompasses the will, the intellect, the conscience, and the moral orientation. You have to remember, ancient people didn't have a concept of the central nervous system or the prefrontal cortex.
Right. They didn't have neuroscience.
Exactly. To them, the literal beating organ in the center of the chest was the engine of human drive and decision-making.
Which totally shifts how you read a famous verse like Proverbs 4.23, where it says, to guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the springs of life. I mean, if the heart is just your feelings, guarding it just means protecting yourself from getting hurt.
Like putting up emotional walls.
Right. But if it's a control center, guarding it means protecting your entire navigation system.
That is the crucial distinction. It's mission control. But the biblical text introduces a pretty terrifying glitch in this mission control. Jeremiah 17.9 states that the heart is deceitful above all things. And we really have to look at the psychology of why it's deceitful.
Because it lies to us?
Constantly. Human beings possess this staggering capacity for cognitive dissonance and self-deception. We construct flattering narratives about ourselves. I mean, we judge other people by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our supposedly good intentions.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's so true.
So a person can be flying their life in a complete nosedive, but because their internal instruments are feeding them a flattering story, they feel perfectly level.
It's like the heart is the navigation system of the airplane, and if the instruments are slightly miscalibrated and lying to you, like Jeremiah warns, you don't just trust your gut. I mean, if you trust a broken instrument in a storm, you crash.
Right. You have to ask air traffic control for an external radar ping to see where you actually are.
But that external radar ping is an incredibly difficult thing for a human being to ask for, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrifying. Because it requires surrendering control. The theological framework calls this the divine search. It's best captured in Psalm 139, where the writer invites a divine audit, praying, search me, O God, and know my heart.
They're asking for an outside perspective.
Exactly. The believer acknowledges that they cannot fully discern their own motives. They need an omniscient, external perspective to cut through their own self-flattery and reveal their true spiritual status.
And when we talk about status in this context, we definitely aren't talking about religious rank or, how many theological books someone has read or their title in a community. The analysis defines status purely in terms of distance and proximity to the Creator.
Yeah, spiritual proximity is entirely interior. The mechanics of this movement are laid out really clearly in passages like James 4.8, which instructs the reader to draw near to God, and he will draw near to you.
So it's an active process.
Very active.
Yeah.
Closing that distance requires a specific set of actions: humility, repentance, and a broken, contrite spirit. Stripping away the ego actively pulls a person closer. Conversely, pride, self-sufficiency, and unconfessed ego widen that gap, pushing the Creator away.
Okay, so if status is all about navigating this distance, how does staring down a future apocalypse change how someone steps toward the Creator today? Because the research outlines two major expectations that fundamentally alter a person's trajectory, right?
Yes, it does. And the first profile is what the text calls the Goshen endurer.
The Goshen endurer. Okay, what's their mindset?
Well, the Goshen endurer interprets the scriptures to mean that the faithful church will remain on earth during the period of global judgment known as the tribulation. They do not expect to be evacuated. However, they do expect to be supernaturally preserved within that judgment.
Ah, so the name gives away the perfect historical analogy. It's like the Israelites living in the land of Goshen during the plagues of Egypt.
Exactly.
The plagues fell all around them, the world was in total chaos, the sky was falling, but they had this localized supernatural shield. They didn't get extracted from Egypt, they were protected on the ground inside the war zone.
That's spot on. And because that is their expectation of the future, it completely changes their daily heart posture in the present. The framework describes this as the soldier posture.
The soldier posture.
Yeah, I mean, if you deeply believe you are marching toward a furnace of global persecution and judgment, your daily psychological state shifts into preparation mode. Your prayer life focuses heavily on resilience under pressure. You're asking for courage, for endurance, and, the fortitude to withstand extreme hardship.
You are mentally battle ready at all times. So how does that hypervigilance actually shape their intimacy with God?
The analysis points to a very intense, almost gritty dynamic. They call it the intimacy of shared suffering. Drawing heavily on Philippians 3 near, which is the desire to know Christ and share in his sufferings. The endurer finds their deepest connection to the divine right in the trenches.
So it's not a peaceful, quiet meadow kind of faith.
Not at all. To this person, God is seen primarily as a fortress and a dread champion. They feel closest to God when the battle is raging, when they are trusting him in the absolute dark. It's a profound, resilient faith built on surviving the fire alongside their Creator.
I mean, that sounds incredibly strong, but doesn't bracing for a hit constantly run the risk of making you permanently calloused? It's like building up so much armor for the battlefield that you eventually lose the ability to feel a hug.
That is such a good way to put it.
If your entire spiritual life is based on surviving trauma, how do you maintain any kind of tenderness?
Well, you often don't. And that psychology of trauma bracing is exactly what creates the shadow side for the endurer. When a human nervous system is locked in fight or flight over a long period, empathy and tenderness are often the very first casualties.
Wow.
So the ultimate risk for the Goshen endurer is the hardened heart. Endurance mutates into self-reliance. Grit curdles into legalistic pride. They might look at other believers who are struggling and think, I'm preparing for martyrdom. Why are you complaining about your everyday problems?
Oh, so a lot of bitterness sets in.
Exactly. The armor they put on to survive the future storm becomes a psychological prison today. They become a hardened, cynical soldier, but they entirely forget how to be a beloved child.
That psychological toll, the danger of becoming a callous, loveless soldier, seems like the exact reason another group of believers cultivates a completely opposite mindset. Let's look at the second profile in the research, which is the bridal rapturist posture.
Right, the rapturist adheres to a pre-tribulation view.
Yeah.
They expect the faithful church to be entirely spared from the hour of trial, and they reference Revelation 3.10 for that. Their expectation is a sudden, imminent rescue called the rapture, which will remove them from the earth before the catastrophic wrath hits.
Okay, so if the endurer is Noah, who had to build a boat and ride out the terrifying flood while the waves crashed against the hull, the rapturist is Enoch, the biblical figure who was simply taken away by God before the flood even became a reality.
Yes, that distinction changes absolutely everything about their interior life. So instead of the soldier posture, they adopt what's called the bride posture. Their psychological focus isn't on grit or bracing for impact. Their focus is on expectant purification.
Expectant purification. The research highlights 1 John 3.3 for this, right? Which notes that everyone who has this hope of Christ's appearing purifies himself.
Exactly. The motivation fundamentally shifts. It isn't, I need to build up callousness to survive a war. It's, I need to cleanse my heart because I am getting ready for a wedding.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And their intimacy dynamic is defined as the intimacy of anticipation. This is heavily modeled on the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25. The psychological state is one of watchful waiting, trimming the lamps, keeping the oil ready, and listening for the midnight cry.
So, to the rapturist, God isn't primarily a dread champion fighting alongside them in a trench. God is the groom. He is the blessed hope coming to sweep his beloved away from danger.
Right, which sounds incredibly beautiful, light, and full of grace.
It does, but this posture carries its own psychological trap too, right? Because reading the research, this shadow side sounds like packing your bags for a permanent vacation.
Oh, very much so.
Once the suitcases are sitting by the front door, you stop buying groceries, you stop mowing the lawn, you definitely don't spend money fixing the leaky roof because your mindset is, I'm out of here any minute anyway, so why should I care about this house?
The danger of escapism is profound here. The framework identifies the ultimate risk for the rapturist as lukewarmness. If your psychology is entirely anchored to an imminent rescue helicopter, you run the massive risk of checking out of your present responsibilities.
You just stop caring.
Apathy takes root. You might stop caring about systemic justice or the health of your local community or the slow, hard, unglamorous work of daily discipleship. The mindset becomes, this world is sinking. I'm just waiting for the lifeboat.
So you create a massive spiritual distance from God, not through active rebellion, but just through passivity.
Passivity and a false sense of security. You feel you need nothing.
Okay, so we have these two distinct postures, the endurer and the rapturist, and both are navigating incredible blind spots. The endurer might become a hardened, cynical soldier whose duty chokes out their love. The rapturist might become a checked-out, lukewarm escapist who abandons the world. Since the human heart is naturally deceitful, as we established, and loves to tell us we're flying straight, how do these believers actually test their instruments to see if they've crashed into these traps?
Well, the source material provides a masterclass in diagnosis by pointing to the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. In this analytical framework, these letters aren't just ancient historical documents addressed to first-century congregations. They actually function as a timeless diagnostic manual for these exact heart postures.
In these letters, it's the resurrected Christ acting as the air traffic controller.
Yes.
He provides the external radar ping. He starts his evaluations by saying, I know your works. He cuts straight through their public religious reputations, ignores their flattering self-narratives, and audits their actual interior status.
Right. And the Church of Ephesus is presented as the quintessential Goshen endurer gone completely wrong. The audit begins with commendation, actually. Christ recognizes their hard work, their patient endurance, and their orthodox theology. I mean, they were grinding it out. They were bearing up under hardship for his name and refusing to grow weary.
So they had the armor fully strapped on. They were the perfect soldiers.
On the outside, yes, but they failed the diagnostic test. The radar ping reveals a fatal flaw. You have abandoned the love you had at first. The psychology of trauma bracing had taken over completely. Their duty had replaced their devotion.
Oh, wow.
They were doctrinally precise, practically resilient, but they were emotionally and relationally dead. They were doing the work of the kingdom, but their hearts were miles away from the king.
That's chilling. But the text contrasts that tragedy with the Church of Philadelphia, which the research holds up as the absolute ideal for their rapturist posture.
Right.
Christ tells Philadelphia, I know that you have little power, yet you have kept my word. They weren't flexing big spiritual muscles. They didn't have the heavy armor of Ephesus. But because they maintained their fidelity and stayed near to the open door, they received the ultimate rapturist promise.
Which is, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world.
Yeah.
Philadelphia represents the intimacy of anticipation lived out perfectly. They maintained their closeness and weakness, avoiding the trap of apathy, and as a result, their promised preservation. But If Philadelphia is the rapturous ideal, the text points to the Church of Laodicea as the ultimate rapturous nightmare.
Yeah, the breakdown of Laodicea is staggering in the text. Is the letter to Laodicea essentially a targeted warning for how a rescue mentality, when combined with modern comfort, completely destroys a person's spiritual status?
It absolutely is. The psychology of Laodicea perfectly mirrors the shadow side of the rapture expectation when it's insulated by wealth. The Laodiceans ran an internal audit on themselves and concluded, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing.
They felt completely secure.
Because they evaluated their spiritual security based on their material and emotional comfort. Because their lives were easy, they just assumed their status with God was perfect.
But their instruments were entirely miscalibrated.
The external radar ping from Christ shatters their self-flattery. He tells them, you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked.
That's harsh.
It is, but the psychological mechanism here is crucial. When you do not acutely need God for your daily survival, because your fridge is full and your bank account is stable, you lose your spiritual hunger. They confused a comfortable life with a holy life. They became lukewarm, neither cold enough to realize they were freezing, nor hot enough to be useful.
And the terrifying climax of that comfortable escapist mindset is the famous imagery in Revelation 3:20. Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock," which means he is outside.
Exactly, he's been locked out. Their comfort and their passive anticipation created so much spiritual distance that the very groom they believed they were waiting for was no longer inside the house. They were faking their proximity to God through their earthly ease.
So bringing all these diagnostics together, the endurer who works hard but loses their love, and the rapturist who waits comfortably but loses their hunger, we arrive at this incredible synthesis in the research. The true measure of a person's spiritual heart has absolutely nothing to do with their end times timeline.
Nothing at all. The common evaluator is what the framework calls the overcomer's synthesis. Every single one of those 7 letters, regardless of the church's specific failures or victories, ends with the exact same command. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
The responsiveness of the ear.
Yes. The ultimate test of your status, your actual proximity to the Creator, is whether your ear is currently actively listening to and yielding to the Spirit today. Distance is not determined by whether you think the global storm hits tomorrow or in 1,000 years. Distance is determined by your present humility.
The biblical requirement for closeness is identical for both camps. Whether your theology tells you that you'll be kept in the fire like the 3 men in the Babylonian furnace, or kept from the hour of trial like Enoch, the requirement to actually be near to God is a heart that is broken, contrite, and deeply loving his appearing.
True status is about the active, vulnerable pursuit of the Creator right now. I mean, you can have your prophetic charts 100% correct. You can know exactly how the geopolitical pieces fall into place. But if your heart is calloused by fear or lulled to sleep by comfort, you are a million miles away from the cockpit.
Which brings us to a critical question for you, the listener, as you process all of this. We've spent this deep dive exploring how theological expectations of a biblical apocalypse wire a person's heart. But, this psychological mechanism isn't limited to theology.
No, not at all.
Think about the secular apocalypses that dominate our cultural horizon today. We are constantly bombarded with expectations of future storms, catastrophic climate change, total economic collapse, the uncontrolled rise of artificial intelligence, or just political ruin.
It's everywhere.
Ask yourself, how are your expectations of those secular storms secretly dictating your heart posture right now? Are your fears about the economy turning you into a hyper-vigilant, cynical soldier who has lost their empathy for the people around you? Or is your belief that technology will eventually rescue us turning you into a checked-out escapist, packing your bags, and ignoring the suffering in your own neighborhood?
That is the real test of your instruments.
Whether the storm you fear is biblical or secular, the ultimate question remains the same. Is your vision of tomorrow making you more tender, more active, and more loving today, or is it slowly locking the best parts of your humanity outside the door? Keep your instruments calibrated, listen closely to the radar ping, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.